Hey guys, Derrick Ruiz, EXP Realty, apartment broker and expert. And today we have a very important topic: how to thoroughly vet tenants so you don't get screwed, sued, and tattooed by professional tenants that seem to be a plague on Los Angeles landlords. And before we start, I want to give a little shout out to Pali Dolphins, the Pali High School. My son went to Palisades High, played football there, so I got my Pali sweatshirt on today. Anyways, let's get started here. As you know, there's just been a rash of lawsuits uh, against landlords here in Los Angeles from professional tenants. Tenant screening in LA is no longer a routine administrative task due to aggressive tenant protection laws, free lawyers, and increasingly sophisticated tenant tactics. A single bad tenant can cost you thousands of dollars in unpaid rent, legal fees, settlements, and opportunity costs if you pick the wrong tenant. So this video is going to outline a layered professional grade tenant vetting system designed specifically for Los Angeles landlords, although landlords in other cities can absolutely use these tactics. The goal is to minimize your risk, reduce your exposure by identifying behavioral, financial, and litigation-related red flags before you rent to that tenant. And of course, I have to put in a disclaimer: this is not legal advice. I'm only bringing you information. You must rely on your own legal counsel before you make any decisions with your property. So let's get started. Part one, use standardized association approved screening systems as a start. So AOA and AGLA have really good tenant background checks, screening applications available to you. It's a good start to use them when you're vetting your tenants. These components include rental applications, government issued photo IDs, credit reports, scroll review, criminal background checks, eviction history screening, income verification, employment verification, prior rental history verification. That's a baseline. That's just to get started. But why oftentimes this standard screening is not sufficient in Los Angeles? Many landlords mistakenly think that once they get that, sort of clean, okay report from AGLA or AOA, that they're fine, but they're wrong. Let me tell you one of the reasons. Did you know that eviction cases may be sealed or dismissed? Civil lawsuits do not always appear on consumer screening platforms. Habitability and harassment claims may be resolved quietly, and professional tenants, those that make a living out of suing landlords, they know how to keep records clean. So screening must go beyond surface level reports and focus on patterns of behavior. Now, I want to talk about really ramping up your vetting system, and that's private investigators doing civil litigation searches. Private investigators can identify prior habitability lawsuits, tenant harassment claims, repeated civil filings, fraud or misrepresentation cases, bankruptcies. And this is not about discrimination. This is about evaluating legal exposure and minimizing your risk. Now, back to the eviction cases may be sealed or dismissed. So let me share my screen. And I asked ChatGPT and Dennis Block's chatbot about this. So let me share my screen. Okay, I asked ChatGPT, do tenant eviction cases get sealed in Los Angeles? And it says, yes, tenant evictions, unlawful detainers in LA and throughout California often do get sealed under state law. Under California Code of Civil Procedure 1161.2, most limited unlawful detainer cases, the types for evictions, are automatically sealed and not available to the general public unless the landlord obtains a judgment within 60 days of filing. If the landlord fails to win the case within 60 days, the eviction filing stays out of the public view permanently. That means eviction cases in LA don't show up in public court, even if the case was filed. So, eviction records can remain public if the landlord wins a judgment within the first 60 days. So, what that means is, here, let me just see here. Even if a judgment was entered or the case is already public, a tenant can ask the court to seal or restrict access to the eviction record, especially if the case was dismissed, the tenant prevailed, or there was a settlement. So you understand that if the tenant won the case, it can be remained sealed. I have a client that went through this process. She sued the tenant for non-payment of rent and somehow lost. It was a crazy story. But that case remained sealed now. So the next landlord doesn't know that the tenant was sued for an unlawful detainer. So that's why sometimes when you're vetting tenants and you look to see if they had an eviction, if they won the eviction or the case was sealed, you won't even know that the tenant had been sued for eviction before. So that's why I recommend that you hire a private investigator to vet your tenants and identify things like the habitability lawsuits, harassment claims, civil filings, bankruptcy, fraud, or misrepresentation. So I had a client that actually hired a PI, and let me show you some of the documentation. So the private attorney that my client hired found a lawsuit that didn't show up on Google because it was from 2004 of a civil complaint for assault, battery, intentional infliction of emotional distress. Here's another one. This was the person filed bankruptcy, which didn't show up somehow when they ran their credit. So that showed up. Anyways, you can see how a private investigator could be crucial to vetting your tenants. I mean, if you get stuck with the wrong tenant that sues you, doesn't pay rent, sues you for habitability or harassment. I mean, as you know, I'm an apartment broker, and I talk to a lot of landlords every day, and I hear these horror stories. So I think going forward in 2026 and beyond, hiring a private investigator could be very, very important. Let's see what ChatGPT has to say. And I typed in, is it legal for a landlord to hire a PI to vet a tenant? And it says, yes, in California and LA, it's legal for a landlord to hire a private investigator to vet a prospective tenant, but if it's done the right way. So here it is. When is it legal? A landlord may legally hire a licensed PI to investigate a tenant for lawful housing-related purposes. Identity verification, matching social securities to public records, verifying prior names, confirming the applicant is who they claim to be, public record searches, civil lawsuits, eviction filings, judgments, bankruptcies, criminal convictions, subject to limits. PIs often access databases and investigative methods screening companies don't use. They can also verify employer legitimacy, confirming job history, so make sure it's not fabricated information, detecting fake pay stubs or shell companies, rental history verification, checking whether prior landlords are real, identifying friends posing as landlord scams, verifying ownership records tied to claim addresses, fraud detection, repeated litigation involving landlords. So it is legal to do that, but you have to abide by the FCRA, Fair Credit Reporting Act. So you have to get written authorization from the applicant. You have to provide adverse action notices if you deny the person. You have to disclose the investigative consumer report and identify the PI as the reporting party. So the safe way to say, if you deny somebody based on the PI's information, ChatGTP says the safe way to say it is the application was denied due to material inconsistencies and unverifiable information provided by the applicant. Never say the PI found issues, we know your history, you've been evicted before. So again, the bottom line, it's legal for a LA landlord to hire a PI to vet a tenant, but the findings must be used carefully. So really good information there. I highly recommend at this point going forward, you start hiring PIs. The one that my client hired, I think, was 150 an hour. It took them 2 hours to, they have access to the Pacer database, the law stuff, all the legal databases and stuff. They can find this stuff quickly. So that's really, really important information. Let's move on. One of the things you have to worry about is, or verify, income and employment misrepresentation. Income fraud is common in tight rental markets and for professional tenants. Tenants may alter pay stubs, invent employers, misrepresent self-employment income. So proper verification includes calling the employers directly, verifying business existence, confirming HR or payroll departments, matching deposits to pay stubs, CPA letters or tax returns for self-employed applicants. So if somebody says, hey, I worked at XYZ company, here's the pay stubs, blah, 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 you better be verifying that XYZ company is a legitimate company, and you can speak to somebody in the HR or payroll department to verify that your tenant, whatever, whoever that is, it actually worked at that company, that the company is a legitimate company, and they can verify the employment, pay stubs, etc. Super important. The next thing to worry about is document fraud. Modern software makes document forgery very easy. Commonly fake documents include bank statements, utility bills, employment letters, things like that. So I think that you really need to get these bank statements, utility bills, showing that they actually lived at the last place that they said they lived at. So you need to really make sure that information is legitimate. The next thing is free legal aid for tenants. LA provides free legal representation to many low-income tenants. This creates an environment where some tenants repeatedly file habitability claims, retaliation complaints, harassment allegations. Even weak claims can delay evictions, freeze rent increases, trigger inspections, and force costly settlements. So landlords must also screen for litigation patterns, not just income levels. So again, another thing is tenant provided landlord references are frequently fabricated. My client called the supposed ex-landlord of her tenant from hell, the professional tenant, and she had some friend or something fake like it was the landlord. And of course she got scammed. And instead, what I recommend, if somebody says, yeah, I lived at 123 Main Street in LA over there, zip code 900, whatever, you need to look up that property, find out who the actual owner is, and make sure that the owner of the building is the same person that the tenant said to her his old landlord was. So you got to go look up 123 Main Street, find out who the owner is, see if it matches the same person on the application. And then I would also look up I would go to white pages, look up that owner's name, see if the phone numbers match. If they don't match, I would call that landlord off the premium white pages and say, hey, do you own 123 Main Street? Yeah. Did you have a tenant named, John Smith? No, I don't know who you're talking about. So you need to make sure that all the information is truthful and accurate. Don't just take the tenant's word for it, because professional tenants will scam you on that. Really important. And then obviously, if you get the right landlord, you want to ask them the pertinent questions. Okay, I asked ChatGPT, what can a landlord tell another landlord about a previous tenant? A landlord can share truthful, factual, firsthand information, but there are lines you cannot cross. A landlord can legally tell another landlord their payment history, whether it was paid on time, how many months were late, if the balance is still owed, if there were non-sufficient checks. Lease compliance. Was there any lease violations, repeated notices to perform or quit, failure to cure violations? Property condition. They can talk about documented damage, photos, invoices, repair costs, whether the security deposit was applied to damages, how much they spent in repairs. They can also talk about tenant outcome, whether the tenant left voluntarily, whether a notice to quit was served, whether there was a eviction filed. They can also talk, if documented, there was noise complaints, police or city response, written warnings issued. So the previous landlord can talk about. They can't give you opinions, labels, or conclusions like, oh, he was a scammer, he was a nightmare, he tried to extort me, anything discriminatory. They can't talk about sealed or dismissed eviction cases, but oof. But you can say an eviction was filed but not completed. So, that's the kind of information you need to be asking the previous landlord, and you got to verify that you are actually talking to the previous landlord. Very important. Just to wrap everything up, tenant screening in LA is asset protection nowadays. A single bad tenancy can derail income, financing, and an exit strategy. Smart landlords prioritize verification, documentation, and risk awareness. I just hear too many horror stories from landlords dealing with these tenants. I've had landlord clients pay hundreds of thousands of dollars in bogus settlements and losing eviction cases. It's just, unfortunately, we have to go to extreme ends to vet tenants so you don't get screwed. Another resource I want to point you to is Dennis Block's artificial intelligent agent. This is great stuff, I'm telling you. Go to evict123.com/chat. It's I think it's more advanced than ChatGPT because it's specific to landlord, rental law, all that kind of stuff. You just click there. You can ask questions. I've been to create this video, I've been asking a lot of questions. They can create all kinds of stuff here. I was asking it about if cases were sealed, if it's legal to use PIs, stuff like that. So it's really, really a really good resource, and I thank Dennis Block for this because if you want to know how much you can raise. If you want to know how much you can raise rents this year, you can go to his chat bot there and type in, the address of your property, if it's under rent control, the year built, et cetera, and ask it, how much can I raise rents based on this particular property? And it will tell you. And if you have questions about what you have to post on your building or how to calculate interest on security deposits, or all the steps you need to take when you rent to a tenant, that information is there. So you really have to be on top of things. Use information like the video I'm creating for you today, ChatGPT, Dennis Block's AI chatbot, and really be careful when you're renting to tenants. They don't turn out to be one of these professional tenants that hops from landlord to landlord and files lawsuits and doesn't pay rent. So this is really important information. I hope this was helpful. As always, if you have any questions, hit me up, call me, text me, chat me, whatever, and I'll help you as best I can. I'm just happy to help landlords and homeowners. And don't forget, if you own a single family home or a condo or whatever and you want to rent it, this applies to you as well. Stay out of trouble, vet your tenants properly, and hopefully you will avoid the tenant from hell. This is Derrick, Ruiz, eXp Realty. Thanks for watching.